Good morning. I'm Gary Johnson, Professor of Urban Forestry at the University of Minnesota on the St. Paul campus. And today we're going to be talking about two things. First of all, watering, best watering practices, which is kind of ironic because it's a stormy day here in St. Paul. But it's one of the things that is critical for the establishment of newly planted trees for several years, actually. Then the second thing we're going to talk about is providing stem protection, primarily from lawnmowers, string trimmers, and animal damage. So let's start off with watering first. All right, before we get going any further and talking about how we're going to water plants, there are two things that are critical. First of all, dose. How much water are you going to put down at each irrigation? And for most people in Minnesota or in the upper Midwest, if you're buying a calipered shade tree, by the way, caliper is measured, it's the width of the stem measured 6 inches above ground. Most of the time it's going to be somewhere between 1.5 caliper, maybe as big as 2-inch caliper. That's pretty normal. The rule of thumb is for a dose, about 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water per caliper inch. So if you planted a 2-inch caliper tree, you could give it 4 gallons of water easily. That's the dose. Ironically, the dose is not nearly as important as the frequency. And regardless of where you live, if you're planting in the springtime, you're going to be watering through the spring, through the summer, through the autumn, until the hose freezes up so stiff you can't do it anymore, which means the soil is probably frozen too, so it would be hard for it to percolate through. It's the frequency that's most critical. And what we shoot for in that first year of establishment is watering anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. And the reason why there's this range, sometimes you only have to water once a week, but the reason for that range is not what's the weather report, are we having any recent rains or anything, it's really what's the percolation rate of your soil. So if you have a heavier clay soil or a poorly drained soil, there's a real good chance you may only have to water once a week. If you're planting on a normal loamy soil, at least 2 times a week. If you're planting in a sandy or a sandy loam soil, you need to water every 3 days or every 2 to 3 days. It's frequency that's most important. And this is research-based information. It's been published for a long time out of Cornell University and University of Florida. So you really should heed their advice because it's rock-solid advice for getting plants established. So that's a little bit about the dose, the frequency, and then the length of the watering season. As soon as you plant, right up until the hoses are too frozen and stiff to water again. Now we're going to look at all the different ways of delivering this water to the plant. All right, our first technique, it's actually my favorite technique, just hand watering. If the tree or the shrubs are close enough to the house, by the way, I kind of like this type of a hose head too, rather than the water gushing out. It's a little bit more gentle. So just watering, and by the way, when you water a newly planted tree or shrub, put the water where the roots are. Don't think, oh, eventually the roots are going to grow out into this area. No, water exactly where it is. And if you're trying to figure out what is 4 gallons of water, get a 5-gallon bucket, mark 4 gallons on it. Somehow you can just use a milk jug. Stand there, get yourself a good cold drink, especially if it's summertime, and water until that brings it up to that 4-gallon or 5-gallon or 2-gallon mark, whatever you're trying to do, and just record the amount of time that it took to get there. Now you have your dose and the frequency we've already talked about. So this is your simplest device. Probably already have one of these. It's going to be the least expensive, and all you need now is a beverage. All right, our next simplest, so the easiest is just go out there with a hose. Maybe you don't have time to do that. Or maybe the trees are planted on a bit of a slope, and when you do water, it seems like the water just kind of sheet runs off. It's not very efficient that way. Either it's not an efficient use of water, and it's not an efficient way of getting water to the plant. So one of the things you can do is just get yourself a 5-gallon bucket. Before you install it, set it by the tree, drill about 5 holes, 3/8 inch in diameter in the bottom, and just fill the bucket with water. And that water then will slowly percolate out those 5 holes instead of gushing out and running down the slope. You can either fill that bucket with a hose like this, or you can just fill another bucket if it's further away from the house and you don't have as much hose. Fill the bucket, bring it over, pour it in, and then just let it gently and slowly percolate out. Make sure, again, you put the bucket right where the tree's roots are, not where they're going to be. All right, our next system, again, we're going from the least expensive and the simplest to the more expensive and the more elaborate. I really like this system. This is a soaker hose. You can buy it. It's just on a 3-point system here. Usually these are less than $5. Install it, just put it right around the tree. You can actually double it if it's a smaller root system. Thread it back on. Place it over the root system. Turn the water on. Now again, we go back to this dose thing. So how long are you going to let this run until you get 4 gallons, if that's what you're trying to water this tree with? Well, the only way you know is when you first set this up, put this hose just like it is now, but put it in one of those buckets and then just run it. Keep it at the pressure you normally turn your hose on, and just let it trickle into the bucket. And once that bucket fills up, look at your watch and say, okay, it took 25 minutes. That's how long I'm going to have to leave this on at each time. So that's your dose then, would be soaker hose, maybe 25 minutes for the dose that you're looking. And then the frequency, again, is anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week. All right, our next little gimmick for watering trees is actually one of my favorites. This is called a water ring, high impact plastic. I don't know if I've ever seen these in garden centers, but you can go online, just type in water ring. It holds 4.5 gallons of water. Nice thing about it, slips right around base of the tree. And again, on the underside of this, it has holes, about 5 holes again, small. You fill it with water, pretty easy peasy. You can either bucket it over, or it's a lot easier if you have a hose. Fill it with water, and then it slowly percolates out again. This is another one of those devices where if you're a little bit of a slope to where you planted the trees, or you're getting runoff because the soil is compacted, this is worth every penny that you're going to pay for it. And then when it's done, just put the plug in. If you don't like the looks of this, you can actually pile mulch up towards the outside. So visually from a distance, it just looks like mulch around the tree. And I've had these out here at the research nursery, I think now for 5 years. I leave them out year round, just as kind of a test to see if they can withstand our winters. I've yet to lose one. Critters don't chew through them. It doesn't it can't freeze up because the water leaks out, and they hold up really, really well. So I highly recommend these. All right, our next device, a little bit more elaborate now, holds quite a bit more water too. These are water bags. Sometimes they're very similar to the water ring that we just looked at. They're low profile. Some people call them a bladder. To me, that's kind of an awkward name for it, but those are the type that you would use if you had planted an evergreen. Because obviously, if you planted an evergreen, you wouldn't be able to install anything like this. So you would get the low profile. They still hold 20 gallons. Each one of these holds 20 gallons, which is quite a bit of water for a tree. And again, your dose, you can fill them all the way up if you want to, or you can fill them halfway up and then come out once, twice, 3 times a week and just kind of replenish the water. They're zippered. So before you install it, you just line up the zipper just like on your jacket and zip it around the tree. If the tree is larger, or if you want to use these for a second season, which I don't really recommend, but if you want to kind of expand this so you can put down 40 gallons of water, Maybe you're in a real sandy soil and it's hot and dry and windy all the time, so you actually need to provide more water. You can zip these together. You can just, and each time you do, you're adding on another 20 gallons. Once you get it zipped on, there is an opening. So you usually just flip up the label and there's an opening. So on this one, the opening is right there. And this one you can put a larger hose in, and this will accommodate about a 2-inch diameter hose. So just put your hose in there, fill it up. This one's a little bit easier if you can't hose things out there so easily. Maybe you have to take it out in buckets of water. This one would be a little bit better because it has a larger opening. What you don't do is you don't pour water down in here. If you do that, it just goes whoosh, like that. You have to pour it down in the receptacle because on the bottom of these are little pinholes. And so this is another one that slowly percolates the water out into the soil, minimizes any runoff, sheet runoff from the landscape, gets all the water to right where the plants are. And kind of like the water ring too, they're almost a combination of a mulch. If you can imagine, once this is filled, it acts as a bit of a mulch because it's covering the soil over where the tree roots are. And it's not too shabby. It does a pretty good job of keeping the soil under there moist. It's much more efficient that way. So these are kind of the next steps up. They're a little more expensive than the water ring, but they hold more moisture. And especially, you might be in an area where you cannot physically get out to water 2 or 3 times a week. So maybe you can only get out once a week. This would be a good system for you. You can just fill it up once a week. And that's the water bag. All right, our next to last product, at least for the ones that I had to share with you today, these are called water wells. And contrary to the way they look, you don't have to get a tall step ladder and cut off a bunch of the branches, slip it down. They're actually just slip together like that. And so you can install it right around the tree, snap them together again. You can seat that down into either the turf grass or the soil, or in this case, the mulch, and then you fill it up. And you fill this all the way up to here. And that's going to hold pretty close again to almost the same as a water ring, about 4.5 gallons of water. I have had some people comment that, well, if you do that, you're going to have water standing up against the trunk of the tree and it's going to cause decay or diseases or something. That's just not true. If water does stand up long enough where it becomes a problem on the trunk of the tree, problem's not the water well. Problem is you have a soil that's not percolating well. You probably have a soil that's dropping gravitational water maybe an inch a week. And that's why your tree is dying, not because of the water well, it's because the soil isn't draining well enough. So this is a little bit more expensive. It's easy to modify. They come in different colors again too, so you can get greens and browns, and they snap together right in place. They're easy to take off. And again, we've had these out at the nursery for a number of years. They hold up really, really well too. So this is it is a little bit more of a significant investment in terms of dollars, but they're going to last for a long time too. So that's the water well. Now we get to the fun one. All right, our last product is kind of an interesting one. This looks like a deflated water ring or water bladder, but you hear it, it's got these little beads in there. They're hydrogel beads. And so once this is soaked with water, it expands out. And then you install it, just like, the ring, install it right around the tree. But before you do that, you usually put it down in a bucket of water, so it'll have a little bit of water in there. And it'll take 10-15 minutes for it to absorb all the moisture. And then once it does, it gets nice and swollen, full of moisture. Then you can place it around the tree. And one of the reasons people like this one is you can mulch over top of it now. So you don't even see the watering device. And then, your frequency of watering, again, you come out, put the hose down or whatever you're going to use. It kind of rehydrates it and then slowly releases the moisture into the drier soil. This is the most expensive thing that I've shown you today. It's the most expensive item that I know of, other than going to an irrigation system. But the benefit of this is you can hide it, and it doesn't look funny. Some people dislike the bags that we looked at previously because they look like garbage bags up against trees. So low profile. I know a lot of municipalities like this. And the main reason I'm showing it to you is I just love, and I'm not big on product placement, but I just love telling you the name of this. This is the tree diaper. And I can see you all laughing right now. It is the most expensive. Everything that we've looked at today, ranging from a bottle of beer in hand and a hose, just watering it, enjoying life, up to the tree diaper, they're just options. The main thing that you should be concerned with is dose, frequency, and the season of watering. And I hope this helps you. Thanks for joining me.